You are welcome to this session about the invention of identities and imagined communities through music. I would like to introduce Teresita Lozano. Teresita Lozano is currently pursuing a PhD in ethnomusicology at the University of Colorado, Boulder, where she's engaged in research on diaspora and musical expression of transnational identity. Her areas include music, immigration, and the construction of Mexican transnational identity, music as transnational religious expression. In the summer of 2012, Mrs. Lozano was awarded a fellowship at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., where she worked in residence as a Latino Museum Studies Fellow. Mrs. Lozano's presentation today on the Coptic community in Denver, Colorado, is part of an article scheduled for publication in 2015. Mrs. Lozano will present a paper of Mexican identity, memory, and the religious ballads of the Mexican Cristero Rebellion at the Society for Ethnomusicology Conference this November.
Hello, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to be here. Je suis désolée, je suis mexicaine et je suis une étudiante américaine. So I don't have any slides in French. There was no time, but I will speak very clearly. It was a dark, early Sunday morning. The curtains that covered the altar opened, and Father Jakob entered the sanctuary carrying incense. A young boy, half awake, entered chanting in Coptic. It took me at least 1 hour into the liturgy for more parishioners to make their way into the sanctuary. By this point, more young boys, teenagers, and college-aged young men had joined Father Jakob at the altar and were dressed in red and white clerics. I was fascinated by the way these boys organized themselves into place without the help of Father, who was already in the midst of the incense ritual. The young boys, even those who seemed like they were stragglers, having arrived late to the liturgy, knew exactly where to be and exactly what to chant. Their voices blended as one response to Father Jakob's cantillation, minus the short solistic chanting among some of the older boys. I could not understand the text due to the fact that Father Jakob and the boys were chanting in Coptic. Suddenly, my ears were drawn to the fact that I could understand the text. I discerned a significant change to the interlocking nature of the liturgical cantillation. Some of the boys were responding not in Coptic, but in English. The phrasing was still expressed with the same modality as the Coptic cantillation, but the English syllables were fit to the contours of the chant melody. Father Jakob never chanted in English, only the young boys. These boys continued effortlessly into the rest of the liturgy, alternating between Coptic and English, and consistent in the melodic foundation. At the St. Mark Coptic Orthodox Church in Englewood, Colorado, a suburb of Denver, the youth community's experience, including the performance of the liturgy and the cantillation classes that prepared them for the performance, provides a space not only for Coptic religious and cultural transmission, but for the expression of a Coptic American transnational identity. Despite my initial intent to focus my ethnographic work at St. Mark's on the general musical workings of the Coptic liturgy in a transnational setting, my focus quickly shifted to the expression of this transnational faith among children and among youth, especially the liturgical ministers, servers, and their respective teachers. The purpose of Coptic music lies in the performance of the liturgy, whose texts, minus the creed and the dismissal, are all meant to be sung as part of a great music drama, consisting of familiar Coptic hymns and traditional chants. The celebration of the liturgy is preceded by two services unique to the Coptic tradition, an evening vesper and the morning offering of incense. St. Mark's Youth Nights, Bible studies, and cantillation classes are structured around the Saturday evening vespers. Cantillation class, for example, meets 1 hour prior to the beginning of the Saturday Vespers, where afterward the class seems to continue as a means of applying chants that were just learned. The main participants in the traditional liturgy consist of the officiant, or the priest, the head deacon, and the choir and/or lay people. The participants in the Liturgy of St. Mark's consist of approximately 8 deacons and servers, including college-age cantors who are also referred to as deacons, and primary school-age servers, a head deacon, and the congregation. The deacon's duties consist of relaying the biddings of the officiant and leading the responses and singing of the congregation. So, the deacon, like the officiant, is allowed to chant in free rhythm, though his vibrato and melismas must not interfere with the basic structure of the original melody. While the head deacon at St. Mark's did lead a few small sections, it was the children and the young deacons who served most of the responses and singing. While Father Jakob and the deacons' cantillation was entirely in Coptic, the college-age deacons and children alternated between English and Coptic chanting, and the younger servers chanted primarily in English, particularly during the litany and Eucharistic prayers. The college-age deacons chanted with a consistent pattern of vibrato. Sorry. My computer wants to turn itself off. No. Okay. The college-age deacons chanted with a consistent pattern of vibrato, tenuto, and embellishment during the chanting of the gospel. Their style implied that these young men had received the same chant education and had developed a formalized musical expression of the Coptic hymns with English text. So right now I'm going to show you an example, a short clip of one of the teenagers chanting the gospel, and you'll be able to hear the melodies sound the ancient Coptic melodic contour, but the syllables and every text is in English. According to Father, the Coptic tradition consists of 7 tunes that are meant to evoke both joyful and sad responses to the performance of the liturgy. These hymns are taught to the children in cantillation classes and are then applied to the performance based on the specific feast in the church calendar. Unlike other Christian calendars, the Coptic year is based on the ancient Egyptian calendar. Father emphasizes that the use of the Egyptian calendar allows the community to express their true cultural heritage, an Egyptian heritage that they trace back to pre-Islamic Egypt, a heritage who one boy said lies with the ancient pharaohs of Egypt. When asked how the liturgy at St. Mark's compares to its performance in Egypt, Father replied, "It is exactly the same, exactly in communion." I then asked him if both English and Arabic were used as part of the liturgy in Egypt. He smiled and said, "Well, of course not. English is not necessary in Egypt. Sometimes Arabic, but no, never English." I then asked, "So American Coptic liturgy is slightly different then?" And he did not hesitate to interrupt me with, "No, it is exactly the same. We keep the same rituality. Our liturgy is exactly the same as Egypt. No changes." Although Father said that the divine liturgy was performed exactly the same as Egypt, there are key modifications to the liturgy that exemplify St. Mark's desire to adapt to the transnational culture of its members, particularly the predominantly American-born children. Father Jakob explained that English was utilized for the children because they did not understand Arabic or Coptic. Some young members may speak a little bit of Arabic at home or understand most words, but most of the youth were only fluent in English. The use of English and its appropriation to Coptic hymnody allows the youth to not only understand and follow the liturgy, but also to comfortably participate in the responses. This participation creates a reference in their native language, English, for Bible study and application of liturgical teachings in their spiritual life. The use of English also facilitates the music education process, allowing the younger members an opportunity to learn the chant melodies without stumbling over the pronunciation of Coptic text, especially since Coptic is written in Greek characters, not Arabic or Roman. According to Marian Robertson, investigations have revealed that when liturgical texts are sung interchangeably in different languages, the melodies remain essentially intact, a statement supported by Father's emphatic reassurance that the liturgy was exactly the same as it was performed in Egypt. According to the young adult deacons, there is no formal music education class during the pre-vesper chant. The setting is meant to be informal, inviting and encouraging, a space where a lead chanter teaches hymn classes based on varying levels of skill and age. Based on my observations and interviews with various attendees of the cantillation class, the process of chant education has always been handed down as an oral tradition, just like the process of traditional chant education in Egypt. All compiled Coptic musical manuscripts and books contain text and simple rubrics. However, there is no known notation for Coptic music. St. Mark's does not use any form of notation to teach Coptic hymnody. Cantillation class is conducted primarily in English, with some Arabic during informal conversation or practice sessions. John, a 24-year-old college graduate and young adult deacon at St. Mark's, states, "We do not use any musical notes or sheet paper in order to learn the hymns. In recent years, there has been some move in certain churches toward using some sort of notation or memorization aid. However, it's not necessarily the norm, and it's not considered to be a traditional way of learning." Traditional chant education is a valued characteristic of expressing Coptic culture among children and the youth community. The music education process allows the younger generations to learn ancient Coptic hymns the way their ancestors learned them, but in a language that they can understand. They do not see the use of English as any form of interruption to the tradition. According to Michael, a 21-year-old, younger children begin their chant education with basic hymns and continue to move on to more difficult hymns as they get older. The priests or lead deacons will teach them what they know through oral transmission and the use of written text in English, Coptic, and Arabic. Michael states, "The lyrics of the hymns are written, but the tunes are orally taught. There aren't many significant musical notes to learn from," end quote. The younger students learn new chants through a process of repetition and consistent weekly rehearsal. Immediate application of newly learned chants during Saturday Vespers allows the younger members to retain these melodies by building a memory bank that will eventually allow them to appropriate different texts to specific melodies based on the feast and season. Michael Ecladiosi, the head deacon and lead chanter in St. Mark's youth community, states that memory goes beyond a one-dimensional aspect of learning and focuses rather on attending the liturgy and what attending the liturgy signifies. The deacon stresses that the processes of learning Coptic chant allow the youth to link different songs to different events and tunes, remembering and using the 1,000 pieces of knowledge and skill, encountering constantly to learn a hymn. This process of learning is directly affected by the language in which it is taught. The use of English allows younger generations who are unfamiliar or not fluent in Arabic or Coptic to link English text with specific events in the liturgy, providing them with liturgical context they can understand and then apply directly to their spiritual lives. Deacon states, quote, "It is important for everybody in the church during the Divine Liturgy to know exactly what we're going to say and to whom we're saying it. This is why it's important to use English for all young kids, youth Americans who only understand English. It is also important to use Arabic for those who don't speak good English. It is important to keep the Coptic language alive through hymns in our liturgy, because if we stop using it, the language will be even more lost than it already is." St. Mark's teaches that hymns help unify the whole church and dissolve the difference between the individual and the group. The use of Arabic, Coptic, and English allows the officiant and deacons to deliver Orthodox Christian doctrines in the most accessible manner without losing important characteristics of the Coptic liturgy and musical heritage. Father states that the central idea of Coptic cantillation is that the human man is the instrument. We ourselves sing to God. Coptic cantillation is meant to provide a means for humbling oneself before the Lord, as well as acting as an invitation to joy and thanksgiving. Liturgical participation in cantillation is not only a way of expressing and performing spiritual heritage, but it is also a means of taking on the role of a servant to the congregation. The young deacons do not view themselves as musicians, but as servants, leaders, and culture bearers. John states, quote, The role of the chanter is to help the congregation as one body in the hymns of the church. At the end of the day, we are servants. I personally do not see myself as a musician, but just as another person praying. The tunics and stoles are merely a sign of service, not of prestige, honor, or rank. In no way do I consider us musicians as if we're putting on a show. St. Mark's does not hold auditions or specify talent requirements to participate. Service is encouraged by father, parents, and other young members that are active in the performance and extra-liturgical youth group activities. The majority of the young deacons have been attending classes since they were about 4 or 6 years old. Many were influenced by their parents, their cousins, and friends, especially those who were already serving. According to Michael, participation in cantillation class led to involvement in youth ministry, including leading youth group activities, weekend trips, fundraising, and other projects in the church. Most members, if not all, of the youth community have been attending St. Mark's their entire lives. It is the only Coptic church in the entire state of Colorado and is not necessarily attended by those who live very close. In fact, most of the college-age deacons commute at least 1 hour or 2 to go to St. Mark's for the liturgy. Now that I'm in college, Michael says, the drive is around 1 hour and 20 minutes. It's important for me to attend because it's what I've grown up in my entire life. I would feel somewhat a stranger in another church. I'm Coptic Orthodox, not Greek, Russian, Armenian, or Ethiopian. My culture is Egyptian, so it would only make sense to go to an Egyptian church that reflects my culture. St. Mark's Coptic Orthodox Church provides the youth a space for expressing a unique transnational identity. Most of the youth community are sons and daughters of Egyptian immigrants that helped found St. Mark's in the 1970s. Michael states, "After my parents moved from Egypt, St. Mark's was the church they founded that they gave them a sort of home away from home and gave them friends with the same culture to help in the transition. This transition that Michael speaks of reflects the beginning of a Coptic transnational culture that is present among the children. Arabic, for example, is not necessarily spoken in all households. Most young adults and children in the community are not fluent in Arabic but understand certain phrases. Some households may speak a mixture of Arabic and English, and some only English. There are some young adults, including John, that are fluent in Arabic and do view their fluency as their native tongue. John, for example, in spite of his fluency in Arabic and participation in Coptic church, sees himself first and foremost as an American Egyptian and both American and Egyptian heritage. Michael considers himself an Egyptian American. Even Deacon, who was born in Egypt and became a U.S. citizen later, considers himself Egyptian American. However, for the younger generations, the children, Arabic has little to no significance because they feel no cultural connection. The younger generations at St. Mark's identify with a transnational Coptic American identity, not Egyptian American. The concept of transnationalism suggests that religious, ethnic, and national diasporic relations are not contained by national borders, but rather defy geographic markers. Culture does not exist in a vacuum, but is highly influenced by global interaction. Cultural and cultural transmission, particularly religious culture, are deterritorialized and may act as mobile expressions of heritage and nationalism outside of the constraints of created borders and identities. An ethnography conducted by Richard Reimers on Coptic young adults in Australia states that even the Australian church provides an integration of ancient tradition into the lives of both young and old followers. The Coptic church has always kept and maintained its tradition. Nothing has changed, and we've ourselves felt as the sole foundation. We've constantly built upon it, and the walls will not crumble. To be a Copt in Egypt is not easy, but you must also recognize that you have been born with gold in your mouth. That is, you have been given a great treasure that others have to strive for. The transnational religious expression among the younger generations at St. Mark's Coptic Orthodox Church negotiates the concepts of preservation versus adaptation in order to teach Coptic doctrine to its American-born believers. The young community has preserved traditions of oral transmission and has integrated the use of English language, which most of its members consider their native language. The use of English and English translations of Coptic text in the Divine Liturgy are seen as tools for teaching doctrine and encouraging children to serve as leaders in the community, for they not only teach each other, but lead the older generations in song during the Divine Liturgy. And as Father Jacob and the youth community agree that when compared to its traditional liturgical performance in Egypt, it is the same, no changes. Their music education, therefore, becomes a vehicle for expressing their spirituality and their Coptic American transnational identity. And as one of these children describes his expression, it's just a Coptic thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this paper. Now somebody have the questions, please.
Thank you very much for a very interesting paper. I was really interested in this expression, it's exactly the same, there's no difference at all. Because it reminds me of a cantor in a Leeds synagogue telling me that the Torah is cantillated precisely the same everywhere in the world, which of course is not the case. I'm wondering if there is evidence of regional variation in the melodies and also of temporal variation. Have they mutated? Presumably they have, but what research has been done into that sort of?
I'm not quite certain. It seems that the cantillation of Coptic melodies in diaspora are going to, even within Egypt, I'm sure there are regional differences, but since this church in Colorado is the only one with several miles in between other churches, it would be hard for me to tell you right now, but based on what I've seen with this church and how they say it is exactly the same, but even slight changes, I think they find it as kind of some sort of informal attack on the integrity of their traditions. I can say with almost certainty that there are going to be regional differences. I don't know right now of any Egyptian Coptic Orthodox cantillation class among children where they teach melodies with English and variety of melodies. They claim that there are 7, but I have nothing to compare it to what those 7 melodies sound anywhere else. And to them, in this almost imagined Egypt that they create in their church, to them, these are the 7 melodies, and even if they change it from Sunday to Sunday. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
Thank you. It was really a wonderful paper. I loved your point about them perceiving themselves as Coptic American and not Egyptian American. I thought that was really very telling. One major comment and question, the issue of the bilingual liturgy and how that's arisen. If you think of things like Mark Slobin's work on Yiddish immigrants, he saw as an aspect of first-generation adjustment bilingual songs and texts, and I wonder if this may have some relevance to the tradition you're looking at. But it also raises larger issues of transnationality and mobility and how things change and how liturgy adjusts. And this is not something we've been able to get into in a lot of detail, and this is a most interesting example. Finally, just one comment. I think those 7 melodies, they may be tied to the monastic tradition. It's possible, at least. It's something you might investigate.
Yeah, certainly. I wish that I could have, for the sake of time, I kind of wanted to make more of a point of the transnational identity of these children through music, but I'm hoping to be able to go a little bit more into the music itself. Since they don't really write anything down, I want to ask, where these melodies come from, according to
Well, I think you should talk to people at this, the synod in New Jersey, the Coptic synod, and actually I have a contact for you who might be useful.
Oh, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for your paper. I have a question about the terminology. In the Coptic community in Egypt, they have a very fine terminology to define the ways of singing. So everything is not song. To say, to cantillate, to recitate, etc. So what about here?
Here, they used a pretty consistent, the words chant, sing, and cantillation almost interchangeably among children. So I didn't really talk as much to the adults because I wanted to know how the younger generation, so below the age of 25, saw it, and they seemed to use the same terminology for prayer and for hymn singing and for cantillation. So they actually don't use very different terminology as you would have described in Egypt. So it's pretty much one word, or 3 actually, sorry.
I have another question. So you say that situation is very difficult for the Coptic in Egypt. And so what is the relation between Coptic Americans and Egypt? Because it seems to be like a mother, but not deciding any more things.
With the relationship with Egypt, these children seem to know. Some of them have gone back, but most of them have never been there. Their parents are immigrants, and their parents seem more connected to what's going on, especially right now in Egypt in regards to warfare, in regards to political events. But these children seem more in tune with their American identity, and it's when they're in that space that they feel Coptic, not necessarily Egyptian. When you ask them about Egypt, they talk more about ancient Egypt and what their ancestors did. They don't seem really in tune with what's going on now. Like that little kid that says, well, we are descendants of the pharaohs, and was just very romanticized Egypt that they have. I think there was
Another
one
question.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. I have many questions, but the first is they sing also in Arabic and in Coptic, of course. So the first change was to sing in Arabic for them.
Yes.
And but I think when they say it's absolutely the same, they refer to the words, to the meaning of the words.
Yes.
This is the sacred thing. And because the same is in Italy, they sang in Italian now, Egyptian Coptic also, for the new generation, of course. And the other question is about the, did you attend the class of where, did you?
Yes, that was actually very interesting, because when I first went, I mainly hung out with the women because the women and men are separated. So I found kind of more introduction and very welcoming among the women and girls. And I had told them that I was there to listen to and learn about the music among the children. And it's only little boys and older young men. The girls sing during the service hymns that they have, similar to even Protestant churches hymn singing. But in the class itself, I was able to attend. I had to sit a little bit away just to not interrupt anything, but I was able to attend and see the classes. It's kind of just repetition. There's hardly anything written down except for the English words that they memorize.
Yes. They teach also Coptic, in Coptic.
They do. They teach the Coptic mostly as I sing, you sing, but when they're doing more of the spiritual training and meaning, it's all in English, and only kind of informal conversations in Arabic. And when somebody talks to the little children in Arabic, they ignore them. They don't really look up and pay attention.
Thank you. We have no more time for the last question.